Okay, let's try it again. Can everyone hear me now? I don't know why I always have trouble with this audio. I apologize for everyone who just sat through the first minute of this program and didn't hear anything. Apparently, I bumped the mute button on my microphone. So a new week, a new idiot mistake on my part. I apologize. Had this problem in the past. Well, I didn't have this problem in the past. You know, I make a lot of mistakes, but this is a new one for me where I've had the mute button pushed when I'm trying to talk. What was I saying? It is Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. We're here on the Panther-Lair Show. We do the live stream every Tuesday night, 8:30 p.m. We gather together on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Pantherlaircom, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We gather together to talk a little Pitt sports. That's what we like to do in the Panther-Lair Show. Of course, we release the podcast later throughout the week, so you can listen to it. And we appreciate everyone who tunes in on the podcast. We appreciate everyone who tunes in on the live stream. We have a little fun. I like to think we have fun. I don't know. Hopefully you tune in because you enjoy it. I know I do it because I enjoy it. If it wasn't entertaining, if it wasn't fun, we wouldn't do this podcast. But we get together every Tuesday night and talk a little Pitt sports. Of course, repping the home field apparel, warm up. You can see the shirt, warm up, the vintage Pitt helmet, warm up, the victory lights. This is quite possibly the softest T-shirt that I own. It's an outstanding shirt, Home Field Apparel, Home Field, HOMEFIELD, homefieldapparel.com is the website. You can go check out their Pitt collection. They have great stuff. They just high-quality shirts, high-quality graphics and images and logos that they really you get the sense that they really tap into the fan bases. And you can look at the different schools that they've released. I mean, I think they've got Syracuse coming out this week is what it looks like. They've done UConn and Tulane. And, I mean, 50, 60 schools. They got a lot of schools that they've licensed with. And they've done some awesome stuff. They have Slippery Rock stuff. They have a lot of sort of smaller schools. Hawaii's out there. I mean, Hawaii's bigger than Slippery Rock. But they have some smaller schools, some D2 schools, FCS schools with just fun logos. And they really kind of crowdsource input for what the shirts will look like, what their designs will look like. They try and get things that the fans would appreciate. So, I mean, I always say they've got a shirt, and all it says is 13-9. That's it. Now, I made one a few years back for Panther-Lair.com at 42.39, which, we were all, it was in the midst of the 2016 season, and people were sort of flying high on that win over Penn State. So we tried to capitalize on that, but 13-9, they have the shirt there. And if it's as soft as this warm up the Victory Light shirt, I mean, it's one you got to check out. Homefieldapparel.com. Go to their website. Check out their Pitt collection. Check out their collection of all schools. I think you'll love what you see. It's great stuff. We support a lot of the local companies. We appreciate and like getting stuff from the local companies and going out and patronizing them. And I think you should continue to do that. But at the same time, Home Field is more of a national company, but they're doing some great stuff with their Pitt products and really doing some great stuff with schools across the country. So check that out, homefieldapparel.com. We got to mention the anniversary today. It's September 1st, 2020. And I bring that date up. It's notable to me because it's my son's birthday. He's 8 years old today. And it's relevant that he's 8 years old because you can do the math on when he was born. It was September 1st, 2012. And I don't know if dates always resonate with people. I mean, I know December 1st, 2007. I know December 5th, 2009. I want to say December 7th, 2010 was the day Dave Wanstead resigned because I made a day that will live in infamy joke. I don't remember the day Todd Graham was hired or that he left. I don't remember a lot of dates, but September 1st, 2012 always sticks with me because my son was born that day. But it's also relevant because that same day, and really later that day, my son was born at like 1:30 in the morning. But I was, of course, in the hospital. That was a Friday night into Saturday morning. The first was a Saturday. September 1st, 2012 was a Saturday. And so it's a Saturday in September. You know what was going on. There was a game that weekend. It was the first game of the season, as a matter of fact. It was the first game of the 2012 season. It was the first game of the Paul Chryst era. And if it hasn't become crystal clear to you what happened on this date 8 years ago, I'm sorry that I have to spell it out for you. But I was in the hospital room as this happened. I was staying in the hospital as my first child, not leaving my wife. Our guy Josh Siggles was covering the game for us. Josh worked for us way back then. And that was the day that Pitt lost to Youngstown State. A loss to an FCS program. I think we called him FCS at that point. 2012, that might have still been 1AA, whatever we called it. It was a loss. It was a bad loss. It was an ugly loss. It was one of the uglier losses in Heinz Field history. In terms of the opponent that you lost to, losing to an FCS opponent is pretty low on the list, I would say. Obviously, Paul Christ, 2 years later, lost to Akron at Heinz Field, and that was pretty bad. Dave Wanstead lost to Bowling Green at Heinz Field 4 years before the Youngstown State game. That was pretty bad. I'm trying to think of the worst losses at Heinz Field for Pitt. For the Steelers, there was that Texans game back in 2002, which I have a distinct memory of because I attended that as well. It was the first Steelers game I ever went to. This is a miserable experience. It was freezing cold. We were up in like the second to last row, maybe the last row, way down on the end, near the open end of the stadium back when it was actually open. So, it was freezing cold. It was a miserable experience. The Steelers couldn't do anything on offense. It gave the game away. Houston had like 96 yards of offense or something terrible like that. So, these are the vivid memories that stick with you. Seeing the Steelers lose a miserable game to the Texans, or Pitt losing to Youngstown State or Akron or Bowling Green. Why are these the games that we reminisce about? Well, it's because today's the 8-year anniversary. So here you are, Pitt fans, 8 years later. You've survived the game against Youngstown State. You've survived that loss and all the losses that have come since then and all the losses that came before it. And as we sit here, we're 11 days away from the season opener. Somebody said I should have a sort of a weekly update, either in the 321 column on Fridays or the Panthers Insider Show on Saturday on 93.7 The Fan. We do that one every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. We talk Pitt sports on The Fan, or here during the podcast on Tuesday nights at 8:30. Just kind of an I think someone called it the AccuLair forecast, and it would just be my percentage level of confidence that a season is going to happen. Because it was really low. You probably remember. We were talking about it being like, at one point over that weekend when it was starting to get rumored and reported that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 were about to cancel. It was sub 10%. It looked like it was all going down for real. And then it sort of started inching back up. We've told that story here on the podcast a bunch of times of sort of how that played out through the weekend and into the new week, and or maybe it was late through the whatever it was. And we've talked about how it looked very bad, and then it sort of became clear that the ACC and the SEC, apparently thinking themselves to be of the same ilk in some circles, decided they were going to push forward, and my percentage level started creeping back up. Well, here we are. We've got a kickoff time, 4 p.m. for the Austin Peay game on September 12th. TV assignment on ACC Network, if you call that TV. Kind of is, depending where you are, what cable package you have. And it's happening. They've been practicing. They've been back in school for a few weeks. And Pitt hasn't had any major issues. I think Austin Peay played without some players on Saturday night in their season opener against Central Arkansas. But Pitt has, as a team, as far as we've been able to tell, has not had many issues. They had a scare here or there, which is going to happen. And quite frankly, outbreaks are going to happen. You're going to have times when a few of your guys are down. They seemingly, from what we've been able to gather from state media, they've been seemingly able to avoid those issues. And they're on track to play. What's my percentage confidence right now that they're going to play? I can't say a season. All right, I don't know what my percentage is on a season just yet, but they're going to play September 12th? Shoot. I'm plunging above 85, 90%. It's looking like it's going to happen. And, good on them for finding a way to make it happen. This is what I said all along about the Big Ten. And it's in the evolution of the discussion about the Big Ten and their decision to cancel the season, lately, it's all over the place, of course. But a number of people are saying, our biggest contention is that you didn't need to cancel it when you did. You didn't need to cancel it that early. You could have played it out a little bit longer. And that's what I said from the start. There was no reason for the Big Ten to cancel when they did. I know that there was a bit of hubris that they thought when they called it off. Everyone else in college football would follow him, and they had the Pac-12 as a bedfellow, I suppose. What they didn't count on was the ACC thinking that it is the SEC and following the SEC's lead and, jointly convincing the Big 12 also to stay in it or try to stay in it to win it. And the Big 10, could have ultimately canceled, but they didn't need to do it when they did. They could have pushed it back a little bit. And by doing so, the ACC and the SEC have put themselves in position to play football games in 11 days, less than 2 weeks. These teams are going to be kicking off. 4 o'clock on Saturday, September 12th at Heinz Field. No fans in attendance. There'll be some media. We'll be there. Reporting on Twitter and on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. You can follow along there if you can't see the game, or even if you can, you might as well get on the message boards and talk about it during the game, right? Why else, what else are you going to do? Just sit and watch the game and not discuss it with anyone? So we'll be there, and it's going to be football. And at one game, I'm upwards of 90%, that it's going to happen. It sure looks like it's on track to happen. What happens after that? Do they play the next week and the next week and the next week? I don't know. I would say week by week, game by game, my percentage confidence drops. Pretty sure they're going to play that second game against Syracuse. Pretty sure they're going to play against Louisville. Pretty sure they'll play NC State. A little less short. It drops. It drops game by game because who knows what course things are going to take. Who knows where we're going to be, in terms of college football, in terms of the nation, and the pandemic, and all those things that are going on. Who knows where we're going to be a month from now, 2 months from now. But I think over the next few weeks, you're going to get to see some football games. So that's a good thing, right? The news that came out on Tuesday, relevant, I guess, to Pitt for the 2020 season. The transfer of DJ Turner, wide receiver from Maryland, former 4-star prospect in the class of 2016, played as a true freshman, played each of the last 4 seasons, only played 3 games this past year, his true senior season. He only played 3 games because he was involved in a DUI and missed the rest of the season. And that's not a part of his story that you can gloss over, but it's also not his entire story. I look more at what he did on the field at Maryland because obviously the Pitt coaches are comfortable with the situation. They feel like he, obviously he checked the boxes for them in terms of character. They feel comfortable bringing him in. And so the question is what DJ Turner, the wide receiver from Maryland, will bring to Pitt. And I got to be honest, as I looked at it, I don't know. He's a 5th-year guy. He's got experience. He's played in 30 games over the last 4 seasons. He caught 24 passes in 30 games, 294 yards, 1 touchdown. Last year, he had a big punt return for a touchdown. What else? I'm not sure if... I can't sit here and say I don't get it. I do get it. There was a player available, and Pitt had a spot, and so they brought him in. Help things out. I think they could have used a cornerback a little bit more. I think they still might try and get a cornerback. I think they maybe could have found a linebacker or someone. There are a lot of spots on the team. I don't know if they desperately needed a wide receiver. I don't know if they desperately need anyone outside of really maybe defensive back in terms of an experienced guy who could come in and either be a backup or probably not compete for a starting job at safety, but could be a backup at safety or compete for a starting job at corner. I'm not sure what DJ Turner really adds to this receiving group. He's got good speed, so he's going to contribute. He's got that as his big attribute, but I'm not sure. I don't know, and I'll talk about this more. But over the course of this month, I've become increasingly more and more bullish on this wide receiving core. I think it's the positive praise for Jordan Addison, the freshman, Jalen Barden, the freshman, Aiden Henningham, the freshman. I think it's the ongoing praise for Shockey Jacques-Louis. I think it's my own expectations and thoughts on Taysier Mack and Jared Wayne. I've heard a little bit of positive buzz about Trey Tipton. I feel like this receiving core should be good enough. I don't know if they necessarily needed an addition, and I don't know how much you really count on getting out of a guy who played 30 games at Maryland over the last 4 years and caught 24 passes. I don't know if... I don't know. It doesn't do a lot for me. But He's a graduate transfer. He's eligible immediately. You have an extra scholarship spot, so use it on him. It's a 1-year investment, and then he's gone. And maybe you get something out of him, and maybe you don't, but you didn't really lose much other than the cost of a scholarship. And hey, I mean, what's that? Everybody's flush these days, right? Fine. They added a wide receiver to the group. I'm not expecting him to come in and be the leading receiver. I might be an idiot. I could be completely wrong. He may go out and catch 100 passes, 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns or 10 touchdowns or something like that. He might. I don't really expect it. I think my focus is still on Taysir Mack, Shockey Jacques-Louis, Jared Wayne, Jordan Addison, Jalen Barden, Aiden Henningham, Trey Tipton. And I think that's a good group. I think that's a talented group. I think that's a group that can actually really open some eyes this year, really turn some heads. I've got this problem, okay? I've got this problem, and it's been this creeping issue that's been growing. It's been snowballing over the past few weeks, and I could trace it back even further than that, maybe into the spring. But I got this problem where, and I apologize, but I have to be completely honest here, okay? I think we're all friends. I think this is a place to be honest, to be vulnerable, to really kind of, speak truthfully and speak from the heart, okay? So I'm going to be as candid as I can right now. My name is Chris Peak, and I think Pitt's offense can be good this year. Feels good to just let that out. It feels good to get that off my chest and really kind of just weight off the shoulders. It felt like my chest was compressing, but now I'm free. I can breathe because I've admitted this secret I've been harboring for a long time. Although I don't know if I've really made it that secret. I've talked about the wide receivers before. I've told you what I expect out of Lucas Krull. I've told you how I think the running backs are going to be better than they were a year ago for a variety of reasons. The question mark again is going to come back to the offensive line. That's going to be a big question, but you see some good reviews about Carter Warren entering his second year as a starter. You like your interior linemen with Morrissey and Hargrove, and then whoever lines up next to Morrissey, whether it's Jake Cradle or it's Matt Gonsalves, whoever it is. And then, you see what you get out of right tackle. It's Carson Lynn, or it's Gabe Hoy, or it's KJ Wilson, the graduate transfer who came in from Hampton. I don't know. Like I say, it's weird to say it because, this is an offense that was bad last year. We're far enough removed from it. We can take a long enough view, and I'll readily admit some people didn't need a long view to recognize this. I kept trying to find the positives in this offense last season, but ultimately they were not good. When they took a step back in every way from the 2018 offense, which was an offense that everyone thought could not be any worse. We talked all offseason about how bad the 2018 offense was, how much better it needed to get, how boring it was, how much more exciting they needed it to be. They needed to throw the ball more and throw the ball better. Well, they threw it more. Kind of debatable whether they threw it better. For as bad as the 2018 offense was, the passing game at least, it was more productive and more effective and more efficient than the 2019 group, which is not the way things were supposed to go. You felt like the running game was probably going to take a step back. When you lose the offensive lineman they lost, you lose the 2 NFL running backs, or at least one NFL running back. Darren Hall has been in a few training camps, but Quadri Olson has made a career out of it with the Falcons. And so you knew that there was going to be a step back in the running game, but it was supposed to be offset by an uptick in the passing game. Well, they certainly had an uptick in volume, but in yards per attempt and yards per completion, and you can kind of run down the stats and say, passing game almost took a step back. And that memory is not far. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I've forgotten how much they struggled last year. And when you look at personnel upgrades, kind of dealing with largely the same offensive line. You're going to have a different player at right tackle, but is it going to be a guy who was here last year, unless it's KJ Wilson, the grad transfer? So it's not like you're changing the personnel a ton there. Largely the same personnel at running back, adding a freshman. Largely the same personnel at wide receiver, adding some freshmen. You have a change at tight end. That's a big one. That's a big part of this offense, I think. And then you have the same quarterback, obviously. So you're kind of, to be bullish on the offense, like I am, to be bullish on the offense, you kind of have to really project improvement from a lot of guys. And it's not just one or two. Kenny Pickett, I think, can take a big step forward, but he's going to need the guys around him to take a step forward too. Those guys around Kenny Pickett can take a big step forward, but they're going to need Pickett to take a big step forward too. Everybody has to get better for the offense as a whole to get better. So when I'm saying that I'm bullish on Pitt's offense improving, I mean, I guess I'm bullish on the idea that these guys will get better. Kenny Pickett's going to be a starter, a fourth-year player, a third-year starter this year. I said he's going to be a starter. He's going to be a senior, a fourth-year player, a third-year starter this year. You know, Jimmy Morrissey is a senior. Bryce Hargrove is a senior. Carter Warren is a returning starter at left tackle as a redshirt junior. Gabe Hoy and Carson Van Lin will be redshirt juniors with experience, playing time. Not a ton of starts, but playing time. Jake Cradle will be a redshirt sophomore, having played a lot last year. Lucas Kroll comes in as a graduate transfer tight end who should improve that group. Taysir Mack as a senior. Shockey Jacques-Louis just needs to be healthy. I really believe that. Jared Wayne showed some real flashes as a freshman. Now he's a sophomore. He's got that experience under his belt. I'm bullish on this group. And more specifically, I mean, we were talking about the wide receivers. I really, I feel like Taysir Mack is sort of a ambivalent figure for Pitt fans. They think he's okay. They've seen him make some great catches, but he's also had some real lapses. And he's never really been able to do it on a consistent basis. Now, he made great catch to, win the Eastern Michigan game, Great catch to almost win the Penn State game. Some really outstanding catches. Probably the best receiver they have on the team, at least of the guys we've seen when it comes to going up and fighting for a contested pass. I feel like he's a bit of a known entity. I think he could be a little more consistent. He could show up a little more regularly. But if he keeps doing what he has done, I think he's got an important role on the team, and I think he can help them win games. I've said, like I said, Shockey Jacques-Louis, if he stays healthy, is an explosive playmaker. Probably more explosive than Maurice French was. And I think Maurice French was a really explosive playmaker. I think Maurice French is going to go down as one of the more underrated players in recent Pitt history. People are going to overlook him because of the offenses he played for or played on, and the fact that, his career ended too soon. There was no reason Maurice French should have played in 2016. To get one jet sweep against Marshall, and then was it Marshall they played or Rice? Who did they play up here? I think it might have been Marshall. And then, to score another really long touchdown run in that absurd game against Syracuse at the end of the season. Oh, and to line up for a few snaps at cornerback. Maurice French never needed to play in 2016. He never should have played in 2016. He should still be on the roster this year. And because, there are guys, and it often happens with a coaching transition, there are guys who will play as freshmen, limited snaps, not really be ready to play. They'll come out their sophomore years, and they should really be redshirt freshmen, getting those freshman-type snaps. Because they're not really ready for the snaps that they're getting. By the time they're juniors, you're like, wait, this guy's already in his third year? He hasn't done anything. And Shockey Jacques-Louis is kind of in that situation right now, where, he's made some plays. He's made some exciting plays and showed the potential that he's got, but he's past the halfway point of his career now. He's only got 2 years left. And what does he have to show for his first 2 years? Really, not a lot. And I think that was the case with Maurice French. And then, Maurice French's third year, Pitt sets a record for rushing. And so and then he comes out in his fourth year and he sets the Pitt record for single season receptions. I think we're going to overlook him and underrate him just because of how his career went, when he could have been much better, I think much more productive and had much better career stats than he ended up having. Now, Shockey Jacques-Louis got the benefit of having 2 years, 3 years to play in this Mark Whipple offense. I think he's going to make the most of it this year. I think he's going to get a ton of targets this season. And if he comes back in 2021, and I don't know why he wouldn't, he's going to get even more then. He can be the number one guy. He can be the number one wide receiver. He just needs to stay healthy. So, I don't know. Like I say, I think if he stays healthy, he's a really explosive player and can make a lot of good plays. Jared Wayne, I've talked about him. I think he's a bit of last year, at least he was used as a possession receiver. But if you have, and he might be able to do more than that, but if you have Taysier Mack going down the field, you have Shockey Jacques Louis, kind of catch and run type stuff, having a big possession receiver like Jared Wayne, and he's the biggest receiver on the team right now. Having a guy like him, I think, can make a real impact and fill a very key role of moving the chains and catching balls underneath. And so I think he's got a good role. And then, I've talked about these freshmen enough. Jordan Addison and Jalen Barden and Aiden Henningham. I'm obviously very high on those guys. I have been since they were recruits, and I continue to be based on everything we hear coming out of training camp. I expect these guys to make a big impact, particularly Addison. Last week, Pat Narduzzi compared him to Antonio Brown. Now, Pat Narduzzi's a lot of things. We saw some of those things this week with some old video that came out. We saw a little bit of who he is, which we've seen over the last 5 years. He is a guy with his own personality, very distinct and recognizable personality. But he's also not necessarily prone to overhyping guys to the point where he compares you to arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL of the last 10 years. If you were going to name the best wide receiver of the 2010s, it's hard to not say it's Antonio Brown. And Pat Narduzzi just invoked his name when talking about Jordan Addison, a freshman wide receiver who's never stepped on the field in a college game yet. I take that pretty seriously. I take a lot out of that. And it just backs up everything else we've heard, right? We've heard so much about him as a recruit, him as a freshman, and now we have Narduzzi adding this on to make it even more, to sort of build that hype, build that legend. And I'm looking forward to seeing him on the field because I think, hopefully he's as good as advertised and we can see some really exceptional play. But I think Barden and Henningham are going to be good too. And like I said, you go through that receiver core, Trey Tipton, can't forget him. He is back. He's back for like his 6th year or whatever it is. And it seems like he's healthy. Seems like he's having a good camp by everything we hear. And if that's your guy that you have, as part of your top 7, that's a pretty good receiving core. Bullish on this group. And I've been wrong more often than I've been right. I'll say that about predicting Pitt football. But this offense should be considerably better than it was a year ago. And I think the receivers are a big part of that. I think the running backs are a big part. Everybody obviously is a big part of that. Of course, the biggest part is the quarterback. Talk about Kenny in a second. Let's get to some of these questions and comments here. Let me see here. Because when we do this live stream on YouTube, some of the fun is that you guys can get in the comment section and post comments and ask questions as we're having a conversation here. You can kind of get involved and discuss, and that's kind of the fun of it. So, starting right off here, S. Mac, one of our first ones to jump in the podcast tonight as we tape the podcast here in the live stream, says, any chance of bringing back the Friday podcast interviews, the ones with Greg Cross and the Central Catholic coach, that kind of thing? Yeah, I keep meaning to, and we just haven't gotten a chance to sit down and get some taped. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing those Friday Conversation podcast. I think we had some great interviews. Greg Cross was great. Curtis Martin was one of the, not just one of the best interviews I've ever done for that podcast. It was one of the best interviews I've ever done in my life. And that has a whole lot less to do with me than it does with him because he was outstanding. He had some great insight. And it was very candid about his time at Pitt and why you look at his Pitt career, it doesn't seem to match up with what his NFL career ended up being, where he's an NFL Hall of Famer, but he's not a Pitt Hall of Famer, and he shouldn't be a Pitt Hall of Famer. You look at his production over the course of his career. Well, I guess he is a Pitt Hall of Famer. I shouldn't say he's not a Pitt Hall of Famer. He is in the Pitt Hall of Fame. He doesn't have his jersey retired. But according to him, when I asked him about being inducted into the Pitt Hall of Fame, he said he was surprised because he didn't think he actually deserved it. And when you look at his stats, yeah, he was just okay at Pitt. Not great, just okay. And he was really candid about that. And that was a great interview. But I had a lot of fun conversations on that podcast. I really enjoyed doing it. We just, the summer, just haven't had a chance to get some new podcasts taped. Just haven't had a chance to sit down with people. Hopefully, we'll get back to that again. But yeah, hopefully, we'll get to try that. We'll get to try that. Brock Medanic asked, any word on who Pitt reached out to on the transfer market recently? I believe it was a cornerback from Rice. I'll have to look into that, Brock. I'm not really sure. I know they, obviously they added DJ Turner, this wide receiver from Maryland. I think they could find room for one more guy if they want to add one more guy. You're getting awfully late here. You've got 11 days before the season starts. I guess if you bring in a grad transfer who's immediately eligible, then you're operating on an assumption that he is, mature enough and smart enough and able to sort of grasp the defense or the offense and jump right into it. But you're coming up on crunch time here. You need to get your roster set so you can go out and play games this fall, because you have a game coming up in 11 days, and you have another one 18 days after this. You know what I mean? And another 7 days after that game against Austin Peay. So you kind of need to figure your roster out. Let's see here. Pittsburgh Sports All the Time. As I was talking about infamous dates in Pitt history, talking about this being September 1st, the 8-year anniversary of Youngstown State, the loss to Youngstown State. I was talking about sort of infamous dates, and I remember December 5th, 2009, and that was the Cincinnati game. Pittsburgh Sports All the Time chimes in and says, nothing will ever beat the what about Cincinnati in 2009. There will never be a worse loss, is what I'm saying. And, there's different kinds of losses, and we know this all too well as people who follow the Pitt program. There are different kinds of losses. There are times when you lose that crucial game that could really put you over the top, like Cincinnati in 2009. I mean, you win that game, you win the Big East, you get the BCS Bowl bid, you go to the Sugar Bowl and play Florida or something like that. You could lose that kind of game. And Pitt doesn't always lose that kind of game. I know people believe that Pitt always loses that kind of game. They don't, because you know what? The Wake Forest game 2 years ago was that game where they could win. They could clinch the ACC Coastal Division Championship, and they got it done. They did it. And really, I mean, you could dial it back to like Virginia Tech and Virginia, those other games they played leading up to the Wake Forest game, where they had to win those games to keep themselves in the hunt for the conference or for the division. And they ended up winning them. But I mean, Wake Forest, it was on the line right there. Just like it was in Cincinnati or against Cincinnati in 2009. They couldn't get it done in 2009, but they took care of business against Wake Forest. They won the game they had to win. When everything was on the line, they did it. So, I mean, they do get some of those. But back to Pittsburgh Sports All the Time's point, there's different kinds of losses. There are those games where you've got a championship really dangling in the balance. You can win and truthfully, genuinely achieve something. But then there's also just the bad losses. Youngstown State in 2012, Akron in 2014, Bowling Green in 2008. On the road going to Ohio in 2005 and losing that game. Losing bad games. And quite frankly, I mean, losing at North Carolina in 2018 was one of them. Losing to Boston College last year. I tend to separate between the Power 5 and the non-Power 5 losses, but I mean, losing to Boston College last year was almost as bad as any of those other ones. I mean, that was the brutal loss of the season. And it was only a little bit worse than the Miami loss. That was a brutal one too. Let's see. Dale Gribble asked, how big of an impact will the wide receiver from Maryland be? I don't know. Kind of like I said, Dale, I'm not sure what impact he's going to make. I don't think they need him to make a huge impact. Oh, you know what he might help on? He might help on special teams. Like I said, he had a punt return touchdown last year. He had three punt returns for 107 yards last season. Over the course of his career, he only had one kickoff return. That went for 22 yards. That was a couple years ago. And then last year, he had 3 punt returns for 107 yards, including 1 touchdown. He's got I think he's fast. I think he's got a lot of speed, so he might contribute in that regard. I don't think they need him in the receiving corps. If you have a chance to get a good player and you have an open spot, you take him, and maybe he helps you, maybe he doesn't. The good thing for Pitt is, they brought in Lucas Kroll. They need Lucas Kroll to be good. When they brought in those other grad transfer tight ends, Will Gregg and Nakia Griffin-Stewart, they needed those guys. Matt Flanagan, they needed him to be good. because they didn't have anything else. They brought in Stefano Millen. They needed him to be good. They brought in Nolan Elizio. They needed him to be good, even though he wasn't. KJ Wilson this year from Hampton, less of a need because they've got some guys coming back who have some experience, but probably more of a need than DJ Turner, who, again, I think he's got speed, might be able to help in the return game. I don't think they need him in the wide receiving core, though. That's just my opinion. RJ Seaman 38 says it's disruptive to a team when you add a player this late in the preseason. I don't know if it's disruptive. I mean, like, if they lose to, whoever, Louisville or Virginia Tech, it's not going to be because the locker room got disrupted on September 1st or August 31st or whenever DJ Turner arrived. I mean, I think he'll either fit into the locker room or he won't, but I don't see him upending whatever chemistry Pitt has in its locker room right now. TRR says let him return kickoffs and punts. Yeah, I think that's a good role for him. He did both at Maryland. Like you say, TRR, he had 3 punt returns and 1 kick return. So he's got some experience in that regard. Andrew Callahan putting it in stone, says, quote, the offense will be good this year. Now we have it in writing. You're right. That's I mean, I'm saying it. I said it, and obviously we have to talk about Kenny Pickett, and we will, and we'll keep talking about him for a while. I'm on the record. I said I think the offense will be good this year. What qualifies as being good? I don't know. Because as I've often said, if they even just averaged 25 points per game, they probably would have won like 9 or 10 games last year in the regular season. And that would just be averaging 25 points per game, which there were like 95 teams in college football that averaged at least 25 points per game last year. So it's hard to say if you're ranked in the top 95. I don't know if that necessarily means you are good. So, saying the offense will be good, I guess, is really just a way of saying the offense will be better by enough to help this team win. I don't think the offense will be the glaring weakness of the team. They might not be as good as the defense, but I don't think it will be, a handicap to the team the way it was last year. Dale Gribble says, I think Kenny Pickett will have a Bill Stahl type of senior year. So this is the interesting thing about Kenny Pickett. And I'll probably write about this in the 3-2-1 column on Friday on Panther-Lair.com if I remember it. I should write it down right now. But I'm trying to think of a comparison point for Kenny Pickett, for a guy who entered his senior season with as much to prove as Pickett has right now. Bill Stahl obviously entered 2009. His senior season at Pitt was, let's see if we get reconnected here. I'm looking at my, here, let's see. Okay. I think we're back. I apologize if you had a little disruption there. Bill Stahl didn't come into 2009. I mean, he came into 2009 with something to prove because everyone believed that he wasn't very good. So he had something to prove, but he didn't have what Kenny Pickett has. And Kenny Pickett has at least a little bit of history of showing some promise. Whether you go back to the Miami game in 2017 or some of the comebacks, I mean, even in 2018 when they were running the ball all the time, he made, comeback play, right? The Duke game. He throws a game-winning touchdown at the very end of it in 2018. He's led them to multiple fourth quarter comeback wins, more than any other quarterback in Pitt history. So he's shown these flashes of promise that Bill Stahl hadn't shown prior to his senior year. Bill Stahl's senior year was his best season, but it came as almost a surprise. I don't think anybody believed that Bill Stahl could play as well as he did in his senior year. And so that's what's unique about Stahl, and that's what I think is different between Stahl and Pickett. And it's why I have a trouble finding a comparison for Pickett, because Kenny Pickett is a player who has shown promise and gamesmanship and an ability to be a playmaker, but he's also been remarkably inconsistent, and he's now entering a senior season where he is viewed as maybe the kind of the focal point, more so than a quarterback would usually be, because you look around him and you've got this great defense and you've got what appears to be maybe the best set of skill players that Pitt has had in a little while, at least a couple of years. Certainly the best set of skill players that Pickett has played with, I would say. And you've got, everything sort of hinges on Kenny Pickett being better. This team winning 9 or 10 games or 8 games in an 11-game schedule, it's going to hinge on Kenny Pickett. He's got more pressure than any of his predecessors. He's shown more promise than any of his predecessors. And he's entering his senior season as the guy who's pretty much going to decide whether or not this thing goes well. It's a really unique situation. I can't really think of a good comparison for the situation Kenny Pickett finds himself in. Because it really is, it's all about him. It's always the quarterback. The quarterback's always the most important player on the team. But it's really about Pickett this year, maybe even more so than other years, because there are so many pieces around him. And there's no excuse of, playing with a different coordinator for, different coordinators in back-to-back years. He's got the same offensive coordinator for the second year in a row. He kind of doesn't have any excuses unless his offensive line just totally blows up. It's going to be all Pickett. And this season's fate and this season's results are going to be put on his shoulders. And if they only win 6 games this year, 5 games this year, or even 7, it's probably going to be because Kenny Pickett didn't play very well. And if they go out and win 8 or 9 or 10, it's probably, I would say it's 99% going to be because Pickett played well. It's a lot of pressure on him. But he sort of earned that by showing these flashes where he's able to move the offense, he's able to run things, he's able to drive the field and make plays to win a game. I thought he was great against North Carolina last year. He made some plays late in the Duke game to win last year. He made some plays. He's done it time and again. He's got to do it more consistently. He's got to cut out the mistakes and the goofs and the turnovers, and he's got to get better in the pocket. There's a long list of things Kenny Pickett needs to improve. But needs really is the important word here, because the team needs him to make those improvements. And to be honest, I'm optimistic about Kenny Pickett. I think he can be really good. If there is one biggest impediment to me being bullish on the offense and believing the offense will be good, it's kind of Kenny Pickett, because so much hinges on how he plays and what he's able to do. So, I don't know. Let's see. Scroll through the questions here. TRR responded when I was talking about Curtis Martin that he didn't really have that great of a Pitt career. And he says, the Pitt program when Curtis Martin was there was atrocious and left to rot by the university. What are your memories of Pitt football from that decade, Chris? Well, to be honest, my freshman year at Pitt was 1997, so I missed that era. I didn't watch it in person. I didn't watch it up close. I didn't pay all that close attention to it. So I don't have that firsthand experience of it. Certainly looking back and in talking to people and reading about it, it was a bad era for Pitt sports. Curtis Martin had the talent. He just didn't produce at Pitt. And if you listen to that conversation podcast with Curtis Martin, he'll even say that. Like I say, he doesn't believe that he belongs in the Pitt Hall of Fame. He was surprised to hear that announcement. And he would say that he didn't do well at Pitt. He didn't perform up to his level of ability at Pitt because he didn't take care of his body and he didn't really try. It didn't matter to him. Sports were not all that important to him. And so that, I think that was pretty telling. So, the program was in really rough shape, but you can't really use that to excuse Curtis Martin's performance, because by his own admission, it was really kind of on him that he didn't play well. We've been reflecting on the 2012 season opener, since it is 8 years since the September 1st, 2012 game against Youngstown State. And Brock Madonic chimes in, I rewatched the Pitt Notre Dame game back in 2012. That hurt to watch. Gave that game away. And Matt Durney follows up and says the refs stole that one with the phantom K'Wan Williams pass interference call with Pitt up 2 scores late. You know, that so Paul Christ's first team, right? They go 6-7. Okay, they go 6-6 in the regular season. They lose their bowl game. I forget who they lost to. Ole Miss, I think. They lose to Youngstown State. That's one. The Notre Dame game, they should have won in overtime or in regulation. Tino Sinceri, as much as he wanted to talk about the kicker, should have converted a third down in the fourth quarter or the second half even, and they probably win that game. So that's two. And then the week after the Notre Dame game, they went up to UConn, feeling kind of good about themselves because they played well against Notre Dame, and they fell into a 24-0 hole in the first half. That's three. That's 3 games that they should have won, and instead they go 6-6. I mean, like, that's how close they were to a 9-3 team. Now, largely they were relying on the remnants of Dave Wanstead's last few recruiting classes, which were pretty solid, pretty good even. But they were that close. I mean, you don't have to stretch the limits of reason too far to talk yourself into that team winning 8 or 9 games. Even if you want to take the Notre Dame game away. Because Notre Dame was like top 5 in the country or number 2 in the country, whatever they were. Even if you want to take that game away, they still should have beat Youngstown State, and they still should have beat UConn. You know, and that's 8 wins. That's 8-4, which would have been better than Todd Graham did in 2011, better than Dave Wanstead did in 2010. They should have gone 8-4. So it's a funny season to look back on. I mean, you know, you can find games in 2013 and 14 that Pitt should have won, but 2012 legitimately should have been like an 8 or 9 win team. It's a weird year to look back on. But, you know, that team, we talk about, you know, culture and how things like culture affect a team. That team had culture issues. And I can't blame them. I mean, they were fresh from being like dropped like a bad habit by Todd Graham. And so I can't blame them for being... Yeah, I always say, those guys on that 2012 team, all right, they felt like they got screwed by Pitt in 2010 when Pitt fired Dave Wanstead. And then Todd Graham comes in. They put up with his crap for like 10 months, and then he bails. So they probably felt like they got screwed by Pitt a little bit more for even hiring Graham. They definitely hated having Graham around by the end, and maybe even earlier than the end. And they felt like they got screwed by Todd Graham when he left. So by the time Paul Christ comes in, and he talked a lot about culture when he arrived and the culture he needed to build. And I think he inherited a very difficult situation because I think those guys, not that they didn't care, they all wanted to play, they all wanted to win. And, you know, obviously they did their best, but there were some culture issues on that team. And yeah, I think there were definitely some culture issues. And I can understand where they came from, but... that was a tough year. All right. SMAC asks, and we'll leave it on this. Will you be at Heinz Field for work this season? Yeah, I believe they're going to allow the media in. Probably smaller group than usual. Not much in the way of photographers, things like that. They're going to try and limit attendance as much as possible. Obviously, fans are not going to be in, at least for the games in September. I mean, you can probably extend that into the rest of the season. They're not going to have fans there either. But we'll be there working those games. I don't think I'm going to travel to road games. I've just kind of been tossing this around. It just doesn't seem worth it. I think we'll have access to post-game press conferences and things like that via Zoom, because I think at Heinz Field we're probably going to be doing post-game press conferences via Zoom, to be honest with you. I don't think we're going to any post-game press conference room. I think we're probably just going to sit, you know, in the press box and do it over Zoom or something, because that's probably the way everything is going to go. So, you know, I don't know about going on the road. I don't think it's really worth it this year. Although I don't know. I'm sort of torn. I wish some of the games were closer. I'll tell you that. I wish, you know, they were playing Virginia or Virginia Tech, Syracuse, that kind of thing. Oh, and TRR just mentioned, Pitt also lost to Syracuse in 2012, which was another game that you probably could not go too far and tuck yourself into them winning. So they probably should have won that one. And another, you know, reason they should have gone 8-4 or 9-3, something like that. But yeah, we'll be at Heinz Field as long as they let us come in. We'll be at those games. Like I say, it's probably going to be a smaller group of assembled media. nice and spread out, socially distancing ourselves in the press box. Probably won't give us any hot dogs at halftime, though. Real disappointment. I mean, be honest, I didn't really eat the hot dogs at halftime, but they usually had some chips and pretzels, things like that. So, one more question here. Will Z, who is your prediction for rising star this year? Returning players, I'm going to say Shockey Jacques Louis. If you're looking at offense, I think he's a guy who's going to break out. I think he's going to have a really good season. I think he's going to be a playmaker. He's going to look like a big-time receiver. He's going to catch a bunch of passes. In terms of returning players, guys who are new to the roster this season, I think Lucas Kroll can have a big impact, and obviously those freshman receivers I talked about. Defensively, rising star on defense, a returning player, probably one of the linebackers, either whether it's Chase Pine or Wendell Davis at middle linebacker, or, I mean, could you consider Cam Bright a rising star? I think he's going to have a real big season at outside linebacker, but he played a lot last year and played really well. He was top 5 or top 6 in tackles on the team. So it's hard to say that he would be, out of nowhere, but, I think it's, I think probably one of the linebackers will be the rising star on defense. So, all right, this is really the last question. RJ Seaman 38 says, what will be the pass run ratio this season? I have no idea what the numbers are going to be. I think they're going to throw it more than they run, because that's what Mark Whipple has done pretty much everywhere he's gone. I think they're going to throw it more than they run. I think they'll try to have a closer to a 50-50 balance this year than they had last year, but I think they're still going to end up throwing it more than they run it, because that's what he wants to do. And I think their talent is still in the receiving core more than it is in the running backs. And I also think this offensive line is probably still going to be a better pass blocking unit than a run blocking unit. So all the signs, I think, kind of point toward them throwing it more than they run it. And I think that's what it will be. What the ratio ends up being, I have no idea. It's, I could just throw a bunch of random numbers out and it would all be made up, but that's, it'll still be tilted toward the pass, but I think they'll try and establish the run a little bit more. All right, make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. If you're watching the live stream on YouTube, like the video, that's cool, but make sure you subscribe to the Panther-Lair.com channel on YouTube, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Pantherlaircom, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers. We're pushing our way up. We really appreciate all the support everyone's shown so far. If you like these podcasts, you like these live streams, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. It's right there. It would mean the world to us, and it really would. But the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Right? I say that all the time. Football, basketball, recruiting, we cover it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. All day, every day, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Stay tuned later this week. On Friday, we'll have the 3-2-1 column that's free for everyone to read on Panther-Lair.com. On Saturday, we will have the Panthers Insider Show. That's on 93.7 The Fan at 8 a.m. You can listen to this show. Well, it's not this exact show, but it's me talking about Pitt sports on The Fan on Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. And then, of course, we'll be back next Tuesday night with another live stream and a podcast to be released the next day. So thanks for everyone chiming in and joining us here on the live stream. If you weren't here, you listen to the podcast, you want to check it out, Tuesday nights, 8:30 p.m., youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Come and hang out for an hour. Talk a little Pitt sports. Ask your questions. Make your comments. All those kinds of things. We had a good back and forth tonight. So thanks everybody who stopped by the live stream. Thanks everybody who listens to the podcast. Make sure you check out the website. And we'll talk to you next week. Next week, Tuesday night, 8:30, we'll be previewing the game against Austin Peay, because we'll be 4 days away from game day, folks. Dig on that. All right. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next Tuesday night.